The Hardcore Continuum, number 1, Hardcore Rave. See my face, not a trace, no reality. I just speed, it's all I need. Johnny Rotten, Sex Pistols, 17, 1977. Rush your fucking bollocks off, MC Scallywag, Spiral Tribe. Do It, 1992. Too much speed is comparable to too much light. We see nothing. Paul Virilio, Pure War. The Aesthetic of Disappearance. When British youth first encountered the term acid house, they misconstrued it. In Chicago, acid came from acid burn, slang for ripping off someone's idea by sampling it. But in Britain, it was assumed that acid meant psychedelics, so acid house became the soundtrack to the ecstasy Raveolution, and another classic example of British youth misrecognizing and re-motivating a black American music. Hardcore techno has reversed the drugs music nexus. After 4 years of rave culture, the music has evolved into a science of inducing and amplifying the E-rush. The vibe has changed from trance dance to mental manic, as ecstasy has become adulterated with amphetamine, or replaced by pseudo-E concoctions of speed, LSD, and God knows what. Chemicals have directly altered the subculture's metabolism, with the beats per minute, last count 140 to 150 BPM, soaring in sync with pulse rates and blood pressure levels. E and LSD activate the fight or flight sector of the brain. In combination with amphetamine, the result is an edgy exhilaration on the borderline of panic reaction. Are you feeling wobbly? Xenophobia's The Wobbler inquires rhetorically. Hardcore is just another form of fin de siècle panic culture, hence the frequent samples of sirens, the ambuscades of sound, the MC chant coming at you. There's even a track titled Start the Panic. But then in Greek, panic's original meaning was a transport of ecstasy. Speedy E has changed the whole vibe of rave culture, from celebration to a sort of aggressive euphoria. The urge to merge and the urge to surge fuge in a raging oceanic feeling. Dancers' faces are contorted with weird expressions midway between a snarl and a smile, or glare with a crazed, blazing impudence. It's the most brazenly druggy subculture in eons, even less coded than acid. Pirate DJs send out a big shout to all you nutters rushing out of your head, speed freaks out there, you know the score, or holler, yes, London town, absolutely flying in the studio, 100 mph. Are drugs essential to get into this music, as hardcore's detractors claim? Well, they'd certainly help hype your metabolism to the necessary frenetic pitch. But once your nervous system has been reprogrammed, you can listen to this stuff on the natural. On its own, it'll induce memory rushes, body flashbacks. Speed has mutated, some say perverted, rave music's development, unbalancing it at both the top and bottom ends of the sound spectrum. Hardcore is all ultra-shrill treble and bowel-quaking bass. Voices are sped up to a 70 RPM pinky and perky shriek, whether they're samples of ethereal girls like Kate Bush, Lisa Gerrard, Liz Cocteau, or Stevie Nicks, or heliumized eruptions of black voice. Closer to fireworks than soul, these vocals have been hurtled beyond expression into the realm of abstract urgency, outside the syntax of desire. Sampled and modulated on a keyboard, they become a barrage of intensities without pretext or context, shudders and shivers that are not so much inhuman as infrahuman. Incantations from roots reggae are snatched from their cultural context to become animated hieroglyphs. Ragga chants add a grainy insolence that's perfect for hardcore's rough and tough uproar. Dub bass impacts your viscera, its alien meter placed outrageously amid accelerated hip-hop breakbeats at twice reggae's pace. Having swallowed hip-hop whole, hardcore's syncopation is a radical break with the programmed machine rhythms of early UK techno. The electronic side of techno has degenerated into stray smears of acid bass, pulsation loops derived from Joey Beltram's Energy Flash and Mentasm, fucked up concatenations of blaring samples, and octave-skipping synth riffs whose function is not melodic but textural. And of course, the sheer speed of their oscillation accentuates the sense of headlong rush. At raves and clubs, or on pirate stations like Touchdown 94.1 FM, Defection, Pulse, Rush, DJs compact rough and ready chunks of tracks into a relentless but far from seamless intertextual tapestry of scissions and grafts. It's a gabbling fucking mess. Barely music, but as it swarms out the airwaves to a largely proletarian audience, you know you're living in the future. Trash, but I love it. It's a mistake to appraise hardcore in terms of individual tracks, because this music only really takes effect as total flow. Its meta-music pulse is closer to electricity than anything else. Hardcore has abandoned the remnants of the verse-chorus structure retained by commercial rave music. At the Castle Morton Common Mega Rave in May, MCs chanted, "We've lost the plot." Hardcore abolishes narrative. Instead of tension, climax, release, it offers 1,000 plateau of crescendo, an endless succession of nows. It's an apocalyptic now, for sure. Hardcore fits only too well the model of terminal culture that Paul Virilio prophesies in the Aesthetics of Disappearance, a switch from the extensive time of history to the intensive time of momentariness without history. The emergent anti-culture of instantaneity will be inhabited by a new breed of schizophrenic subject, whose ego is made up of a series of little deaths and partial identities. No narrative, no destination. Hardcore is an intransitive acceleration, an intensity without object. That's why the MC patter sounds more appropriate for a roller coaster than music. Hold tight, let's go, hold it down. And why techno is all you'll hear at fairgrounds these days. Does this disappearance of the object of desire, this intransitive intensity, make hardcore a culture of autistic bliss? Certainly, sex as the central metaphor of dancing seems remoter than ever. Rave dancing doesn't bump and grind from the hip. It's abandoned the model of genital sexuality altogether for a kind of polymorphous perverse frenzy. It's a dance of ticks and twitches, jerks and spasms, the agitation of a body broken down into individual components, then reintegrated at the level of the entire dance floor. Each sub-individual part, a limb, a hand cocked like a pistol, is a cog in a collective desiring machine, which is why dancers so readily pick up moves from each other. The dance floor is like a primal DNA soup. It's pagan too, this digital Dionysian derangement whose goal is to find asylum in madness. Hence the slang of mental and nutty, sound systems with names like Bedlam, groups with names like Lunarcy, MCs chanting "off my fucking tree," pejoratives turned into desirable states of mindlessness. It's emotionally regressive too, as all the musically progressive genres of the last decade, rap, oceanic rock, noise, have been, hence the infantilism of ravers sucking on dummies, or bubblegum chart hits like A Trip to Trumpton, Sesame's Treat, The Prodigy's Charlie. But then Virilio reminds us that child society frequently utilizes turnings, spinning around, disequilibrium. It looks for sensations of vertigo and disorder as sources of pleasure. He cites Jacques-Henri Latigue's childhood game of spinning round and round in order to create a dizziness that reduced the environment to a sort of luminous chaos. Virilio's book is a jeremiad about an emergent culture based around pycnolepsy, his term for frequent, incredibly brief ruptures in consciousness. Pycnolepsy is a take on epilepsy, which Webster's defines as a disorder marked by disturbed electrical rhythms of the central nervous system, and typically manifested by convulsive attacks, usually with clouding of consciousness. Epilepsy was a sacred malady for the Greeks. Hardcore is poised somewhere on the brink between pycnolepsy and epilepsy. We all know how strobes, the staple of rave light shows, can cause convulsions. Hardcore is the oral analog of a strobe, a sequence of frozen stopgap soundbites that have been artificially reanimated with electricity. Virilio could be writing about the rave scene in 1992. With the irregularity of the epileptic space defined by surprise and an unpredictable variation of frequencies, it is no longer a matter of tension or attention, but of suspension pure and simple, by acceleration, disappearance and effective reappearance of the real, departure from duration. This is the feeling that the KLF caught with the title, if not the sound, of 3 a.m. Eternal. Speed reproduces the effects of pycnolepsy, a perpetually repeated hijacking of the subject from any spatial temporal context. You're gone, totally out of it. And there's more. A warning sign for epileptics of an imminent attack was a special state of happiness, a juvenile exhilaration. Sublime, wrote Dostoevsky, a sufferer. For that moment you'd give your whole life. At that moment I understood the meaning of that singular expression. There will no longer be time. This juvenile nihilism is the reason why hardcore perturbs so many. This music is best understood as a neurological, not cultural phenomenon. It abolishes the role of cultural mediators. Textless, it offers little to interpret in itself. Its subcultural text resides in its effects. Critics who like to deal with rock and roll as a surrogate form of literature are the most threatened by this anti-humanist noise, which is closer to a power source or intoxicant than poetry. But hardcore also challenges those who seized on the more musicianly participants in rave music to argue the case for house and techno as art forms. There is a prejudice against one-dimensional music. It's both amazing and amusing to see how exactly the same rhetoric used by detractors of 50s rock and roll recurs as a knee-jerk tick amongst rock fans when they're faced by a new barbaric non-music. Along with the racist notion of jungle music, by happy coincidence, one of hardcore's big subgenres this year was jungle. One of the things most feared about rock and roll was its extreme repetitiveness, which is exactly what the anti-hardcore enclaves bemoan. Repetition is a psychoactive agent in itself, of course. Anyway, to those who insist that hardcore just isn't music, I won't argue. I couldn't care less. But I do know that every new development in pop, from punk to rap to acid house, has initially been greeted with such spasms of fear and loathing. The new heavy metal. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, British groups bastardized the blues, and their American imitators bastardized their bastardization, and between them they spawned heavy metal. In the late 80s, black Europhiles from Chicago and Detroit took Teutonic electronic music and turned it into acid house and techno. In the early 90s, British youth took these styles and birthed a mutant bastard form called hardcore. Veterans of 1988's first wave of rave denounce hardcore in exactly the same language that counterculture vets decried metal, as soulless, macho, bombastic, proto-fascist, a corrupt and degraded version of a once noble tradition. They've even called hardcore the new heavy metal. With the same piety that people once harked back to Cream and deplored Sabbath and Led Zepp, similarly, rave cognoscenti mourn Derek May and flinch from the brutalism of Beltram and Two Bad Mice. In an unfortunate echo of prog rock, some have even erected the concept of progressive house, the future sound of London, the Orb, Guerilla Records. as a bulwark of good taste against the hooligan hordes of hardcore? Well, history shows us that the despised Black Sabbath subsequently went on to be perhaps the biggest influence on alternative rock in the 80s and 90s, from Black Flag through Butthole Surfers to Seattle grunge. While Jethro Tull, ELP, and Pink Floyd went on to influence practically nobody. Maturation was always only one possible route of development for the music of the post-acid diaspora. Like heavy metal did with blues rock, hardcore has taken the essence of acid house and techno, mindless repetition, stroboscopic synths, bass quake frequencies, and coarsened and intensified it. As with metal, bad drugs, barbiturates, then dodgy E now, have helped them focus on that essence. To an extent, hardcore does present a spectacle of degraded avant-gardism, of arrested futurism. Headless chickens running wild with avant-garde techniques, timbral, textural, spatial invention rather than melodic harmonic development, drone theory, extreme repetition, extreme randomness, musique concrete, etc. But not really knowing how to build with them. But hardcore advances not through the innovations of auteurs, but rather evolves through mutation. Inspired errors and random fucking about produce new riffs and noises that succeed in the dance floor ecosystem and then enter the gene pool. Which explains why, whenever someone does come up with a new idea, it's ripped off 1,000 times. Anyway, I wagered that those looking for the next revolution would do better to watch for what crawls out of the hardcore morass than to carry a torch for Detroit, LFO, or Orbital, as inspired as they've all been in their day. The politics of disappearance. Hardcore is really just the latest twist on the traditional contours of working-class leisure, the latest variant of the sulfate-fueled 60-hour weekend of mod and northern soul lore. With hardcore, the proletarian culture of consolation has become a culture of concussion, hence amnesiac and aesthetic slang terms for a desirable state of oblivion such as sledged, as in sledgehammered, mashed up, cabbage, monged, and song titles like Blackout and Hypnoblast. There's a sampled slice of rap at large in hardcore that goes, "Can't beat the system, go with the flow." On one level, it's just a boast about how much damage the sound system can inflict. But perhaps there's a submerged political resonance in there too. Amidst the socio-economic deterioration of a Britain well into its second decade of one-party rule, where alternatives seem unimaginable, horizons grow ever narrower, and there's no constructive outlet for anger. What else is there left but to zone out, go with the flow, disappear? But retreatism is just one side of the rave scene. There's an inchoate fury in the music that comes out in an urge for total release from constraints, a lust for explosive exhilaration, captured in titles like Hypergasm. The ragga chant of Xenophobia's Rush in the House kicks off, "E come alive, E come alive, E come alive."
He come alive, he come alive, he come alive.
Hardcore frenzy is where the somnambulist youth of Britain snap out of the living death of the 90s and grasp a few moments of fugitive bliss. Hardcore seethes with a rage to live, to cram all the intensity absent from a week of drudgery into a few hours of fervor. It's a quest to reach escape velocity. Speed freak youth are literally running away from their problems, and who can blame them?